Before the news cycle and the media from the upcoming event washes over the amazing feat that Matt Brown accomplished this past weekend, I want to take time to properly acknowledge the immortal. I feel strongly about the need to do this because after knocking out Court McGee in the first round with a perfectly timed straight right and tying the record for the most knockouts in UFC history, the guy deserves a lot more time in the sun than he's gonna get. And I don't blame the UFC or anybody else for things being this way. With the way the game is these days, one event runs into the next, and even the biggest and most impressive world title victories are instantly drowned out by the media hoopla just days after the fact. But for a guy that's been entertaining us under the UFC banner for going on 15 years, you really have to stop and appreciate what he's done. And not just what he did at UFC Charlotte, but what he's done throughout his entire career and how he looks present day. For me, I've always said that aside from winning a UFC title, the second greatest accomplishment in MMA is achieving longevity in the sport. It takes a special person to do so. Matt Brown just hasn't achieved longevity, but he's done it without the decline we're so used to seeing in the latter stages of his career. And in a lot of ways, he's looking better than he's ever been. It's crazy because in his pre-fight press conference ahead of UFC Charlotte, I was actually thinking to myself that this may have been the happiest Matt Brown I've ever seen. And I've been watching this guy since The Ultimate Fighter Season 7. He actually had a smile on his face. A smile. I've been watching this guy for countless hours over the past 15 years, and I feel like I may have seen him smirk twice in my life. In the press conference, he talked about how this may have been the best weight cut he's ever done, which really speaks volumes because anybody who follows this sport will tell you that historically, the older a fighter is, the more difficult it becomes to cut weight. He talked about how good his mentality is right now and how he's just a lot more relaxed and stress-free and no longer putting so much pressure on himself, which is a pretty incredible thing to behold. When Oscar Willis of MacLife asked if he was feeling this way, perhaps because he was closer to the end of his career than he was to the beginning, Brown agreed. And that verified that the place that we're seeing him in right now is a mentality that comes out of 18 years of doing this and maturing both as a fighter and as a person. So it made it all the more impressive when the Immortal showed out with a first round walk-off knockout over a guy that's the epitome of tough in Court McGee. He has consistently been entertaining and produced thrilling fights after 15 years under the UFC banner. And out of 46 fights in his career, only 7 of them have went the distance. And what's more is that after all of those wars against some of the most dangerous fighters the UFC had to offer, he really hasn't shown any signs of diminished durability or skill set. And mentally, he seems to be in the best place he's ever been. He may not have the speed he once had, but he makes up for that in efficiency and octagon wisdom. It's crazy because a lot of people in Brown's age group peaked around 2013 or so. I'm not claiming that he's poised for a title run, but I am claiming that I think he would surprise a lot of people for how well he would do if he were to get locked in there with some of the top talents at 170 pounds right now. He may not be as strong and as fast as the Leon Edwards and the Kamaru Usmans of the world, but he has a level of toughness, experience, and old school mentality that would go a lot further than what most people would give it credit for. Matt Brown deserves a lot of praise for various reasons. For as long as he's been in the UFC, for as much as the game has changed, this guy has never wavered in being true to himself. He belongs in the company of fighters like Nick and Nate Diaz, Cowboy Cerrone, and Rob Lee Lawler in terms of being totally genuine and not about that manufactured fight promotion nonsense that's plagued this sport and at times made it exhausting. He is a legit bad motherfucker through and through. There is no putting it on for the camera for him because the legit badasses don't give a shit if the cameras are rolling or what people think of him. He's the type of fighter that built this sport into what it is today, and the guy ought to be treated with a level of reverence that a lot of his peers have received before him. I do think his performance this weekend really left an impression on the fan base, and that for however long he's here with us, he's going to start to get that shine that a true legend of this sport possesses. As far as how much is left in the tank, I suppose we have to be realistic. Brown is forthcoming about a lot of the injuries he's dealing with. You have to imagine almost 20 years as a professional MMA fighter at the highest level is going to wear on you. And he's a busy guy outside of his own fighting career between running businesses and having fighters under him on the come up. But after just tying the record for the most knockouts in UFC history and looking as good as he did while doing it, you have to think he's going to be extra motivated to get in there and break that record before he calls it a career. So needless to say, fans are in for a treat whenever his next fight comes. Matt Brown, a living legend and the last of a dying breed.